The lightning struck so close I could taste the copper in the air, could feel my teeth vibrate with the raw electricity dancing across the high desert plateau. I was lying face down in the red Colorado dirt, my chrono device sparking against my wrist like a dying star, and somewhere behind me in that massive wooden laboratory, a man who would change the world was watching me materialize out of thin air. This wasn't how I'd planned my arrival. The displacement sickness hit me in waves. Nausea, vertigo, the sensation that my molecules were still scattered across time and space, slowly reassembling themselves into something that resembled Nikola Brown. I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees, spitting dust, trying to remember how to breathe in air that hadn't been filtered through 22nd century scrubbers. The smell here was overwhelming. Ozone, pine sap, coal smoke, the clean sharpness of thin mountain air at nearly 6,000 feet above sea level. Behind me, I heard the creak of a door, footsteps on wooden planks, then a voice, accented and precise, cutting through the electric hum that filled the air like a living thing. Stand up, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them. I raised my hands, still on my knees, and turned my head. The man standing in the doorway of the laboratory was tall and gaunt, dressed in a well-tailored suit despite the isolation of this place. His dark hair was immaculately combed, his mustache perfectly groomed. But it was his eyes that caught me, intense, burning with an intelligence that bordered on mania. He held what looked like a modified cattle prod, except it was crackling with blue-white electricity that made my chronofiber coat stand up in protest. Nikola Tesla, in person, looking at me like I was either the most fascinating or most dangerous thing he'd ever seen. I said, "Stand up," he repeated, his Serbian accent thickening slightly, and explained to me how a man appears out of thin air in the middle of my field during a perfectly controlled lightning experiment. I got to my feet slowly, keeping my hands raised. The chrono device on my left wrist was still warm, still cycling through its recovery sequence. I could see Tesla's eyes lock onto it, could see his brilliant mind already working through the impossibilities. Would you believe me if I said I took a wrong turn? I tried a smile. It didn't work. Tesla took a step forward, his improvised weapon humming with menace. I am not a man who appreciates humor when confronted with the inexplicable. I saw you materialize. Not arrive, not approach, but appear from nothing, surrounded by a corona of light that resembled plasma discharge, but with characteristics I have never witnessed. And that device on your wrist, he gestured with the crackling rod. That is not Western Union telegraph equipment. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of juniper and sage across the barren plateau. In the distance, I could see the lights of Colorado Springs, a small frontier city perched at the foot of Pikes Peak. It was July of 1899, and I was standing in the presence of one of the greatest minds in human history, a man whose work would light up the entire world, if he lived long enough to complete it. Which was why I was here. The temporal historians had detected an anomaly, a divergence point that shouldn't exist. In the original timeline, Tesla's Colorado Springs experiments ran for 9 months without incident. But in the corrupted timeline, the one that was starting to bleed through, something happened here in July. Something that killed Tesla and delayed the development of alternating current power transmission by decades, plunging the 20th century into darkness. My mission was simple. Identify the threat, neutralize it, disappear. Don't get caught. Don't interfere beyond the absolute minimum necessary, and definitely don't end up on the wrong end of one of Tesla's experimental weapons. My name is Nikola Brown, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not here to hurt you or steal your research. I'm here because you're in danger. Tesla's laugh was sharp and humorless. I am always in danger. Edison's hired thugs, Westinghouse's lawyers, the local ranchers who believe my experiments are killing their cattle, the ministers who think I am playing with God's thunder. You will have to be more specific. Someone is going to try to kill you. Soon, within the next few days. His expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not fear, but interest. Come inside, he said finally, lowering his weapon slightly. If you are an assassin, you are a remarkably ineffective one. If you are something else, he paused, studying me with those intense eyes. If you are something else, then perhaps we have much to discuss. The laboratory was like nothing I'd ever seen, even in my own time. The main space was dominated by an enormous coil, Tesla's famous magnifying transmitter, that rose nearly 50 feet to the ceiling. Secondary coils, capacitors, and strange copper structures filled every available space. The air itself seemed alive, charged with potential energy. Every surface hummed with barely contained power. Tesla gestured for me to sit in a wooden chair near his workbench, then positioned himself across from me, the electrified rod within easy reach. Between us was a clutter of notebooks, calculations, and strange mechanical devices in various states of completion. "You share my first name," he said, settling into his chair with a peculiar precision. Everything about him was precise, controlled. "That is either a remarkable coincidence or a calculated choice. Which is it?" "Coincidence," I said. "My parents had interesting taste." "And your family name, Brown?" "That is very Anglo. Yet your features suggest—" He leaned forward, examining me like a specimen. "Mediterranean ancestry, perhaps? Or possibly Slavic?" I needed to redirect this conversation before he started taking measurements of my skull. "Mr. Tesla, I know you have questions about who I am and how I arrived. But every minute we spend talking about me is a minute we're not spending on keeping you alive. Tell me about your security arrangements. Who else knows you're out here? Who has access to this facility?" Changing the subject. Tesla's smile was thin. A classic technique. "But very well, I will indulge you, for now. My assistant, Coleman Cito, handles the day-to-day operations. He lives in a smaller building approximately 200 yards from here. I also employ a local man, Joseph Dozier, who manages the power connections to the Colorado Springs Electric Company. Beyond that," he spread his hands, "I am alone. By choice. The work I am doing here requires isolation, concentration, and absolute secrecy. Too many people would like to see me fail." "What about visitors? Anyone unusual in the past few weeks?" Tesla's eyes narrowed. "You are asking very specific questions for a man who appeared out of thin air. Before I answer anything more, you will explain that device on your wrist. I have dedicated my life to understanding the fundamental forces of nature: electricity, magnetism, energy transmission. What I saw when you arrived was beyond any theoretical framework I possess. Either you are using technology so advanced it appears magical, or what? Or you are not from this time at all." The words hung in the air between us, charged with more energy than any of his coils. I could lie, but Tesla wasn't a man who accepted comfortable falsehoods. His entire life was built on pursuing truth, no matter how uncomfortable or world-shattering it might be. "I'm from the future," I said quietly. "The year 2157. I'm what they call a chrononaut, a traveler through time. This device," I held up my wrist, letting him see the chrono device in all its impossible complexity. "This is a temporal displacement generator. It allows me to move backwards and forwards through time, to witness history, I hesitated, "to make sure history happens the way it's supposed to." Tesla stood up so abruptly his chair fell backwards. He began pacing, his hands moving through the air as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "Time travel, temporal mechanics, the fourth dimension made navigable." He spun to face me, his eyes blazing. H.G. Wells published his novel 4 years ago. I read it, of course, pure fantasy. Impossible according to every law of physics I understand. But then again, they said alternating current was impossible. They said wireless transmission of energy was impossible. They said... He stopped pacing, stared at me. "Show me." "Prove it." "I can't. The device is locked into a recovery cycle after the displacement. It takes 24 hours before I can make another temporal jump. That's one of the safety features. It prevents chrononauts from making rapid successive jumps that could damage the timeline." Safety features. Tesla laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course. Even in the far future, even with technology that defies everything we know, there are still safety features, still limitations." He sat back down, leaning forward intensely. "Tell me about the future, about how the world has changed, about what becomes of my work." This was dangerous territory. The temporal protocols were clear. Minimal information disclosure, no detailed predictions, nothing that could alter the subject's behavior in ways that might corrupt the timeline. But I also needed Tesla's cooperation if I was going to protect him from whatever threat was coming. Your work succeeds, I said carefully. Not the way you hope, not as quickly as you want, but it succeeds. Alternating current becomes the standard for power distribution worldwide. Your patents light up cities across the globe. Your name becomes synonymous with innovation and genius. But, he leaned even closer, there is a but in your voice. I can hear it. But you die in poverty, I said, the words harder than I expected. Alone in a New York hotel room in 1943, brilliant but forgotten, your later work dismissed as the ravings of a madman, your papers seized by the government, your legacy. I stopped, seeing the pain in his eyes. Your legacy takes decades to properly recognize. Tesla sat back slowly, something crumbling behind his carefully maintained facade. I see. So even in success, there is failure. Even in changing the world, there is obscurity. He was quiet for a long moment. Then his gaze sharpened again. Is that why you are here? To prevent my death in this hotel room? No. You live to old age naturally, at least in the original timeline. I'm here because someone is interfering with these experiments. Someone is going to sabotage your work here in Colorado Springs, and in the process, they're going to kill you. That death creates a divergence, a split in the timeline that changes everything that comes after. Who? The word was hard, cold. Who would do this? Before I could answer, the lights flickered. All of them simultaneously. Then the hum that had been constant since I entered the building shifted, deepened, became something else. Tesla was on his feet instantly, moving toward a bank of instruments with the speed and precision of a man who knew his equipment intimately. That is wrong, he muttered, checking gauges, adjusting dials. The power draw is all wrong. Someone has... The explosion came from outside, a massive electrical discharge that turned night into day. Through the laboratory windows, I saw a column of lightning erupt from one of the external coils, a wild, uncontrolled bolt that split the darkness like the fingers of an angry god. The building shook. Glass shattered somewhere in the back rooms. Sabotage! Tesla was already running toward the door, grabbing tools as he moved. Someone has bypassed my safety systems, reversed the polarity on the secondary coils. If I don't shut it down immediately, the feedback will destroy the entire facility and likely kill everyone within a half-mile radius. I was right behind him as he burst through the door and into the chaos outside. The night air was alive with electricity, my hair standing on end, my skin prickling with induced current. The massive coil I'd seen behind the laboratory was throwing off lightning in all directions, each bolt carving purple afterimages across my vision. The smell of ozone was overpowering, choking. Tesla ran toward a control panel near the base of the tower, his hands already reaching for switches and breakers. I saw the problem the same moment he did. The panel was locked, and not with any lock he'd installed. This was modern, sophisticated, a temporal incursion lock that could only have come from my time. It's sealed, Tesla shouted over the roar of electrical discharge. I cannot shut it down. I grabbed my chrono device, trying to access its emergency functions. The displacement generator was useless, but the device had other capabilities, including a quantum tunneling field that might be able to disrupt the lock's electronics. I pressed it against the panel's control mechanism, praying the partial charge would be enough. The lock sparked, fizzled, and fell away. Tesla didn't waste time asking questions. He threw switches with desperate speed, fighting to control the massive energies he'd unleashed. But whoever had sabotaged the system knew what they were doing. The coil was in full feedback cascade now, drawing power not just from the Colorado Springs Electric Company, but somehow from the atmosphere itself, creating a self-sustaining reaction that was growing exponentially. It's not working. Tesla's voice cracked with something I hadn't heard from him before. Fear. Not for himself, but for his work, for the destruction this could cause. The feedback loop is self-reinforcing. I need to physically disconnect the primary coil, but the current running through those cables would kill anyone who touched them, I finished. I know. I looked at the tower, at the crackling death dancing along its structure, and made a decision that definitely violated about 16 different temporal protocols. My chronofiber coat was designed to provide limited protection against environmental hazards, radiation, extreme temperatures, and yes, electrical discharge. It wasn't meant for this kind of exposure, but it was better than nothing. "Tell me exactly what needs to be disconnected," I said. Tesla grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You will die. The current is protected. My clothing has some electrical resistance. Tell me what to do." His eyes met mine, and I saw the calculation happening behind them. The assessment of odds, the weighing of options. Then he nodded sharply. "The primary cable, thick as your arm, copper core with rubber insulation. It runs from the base of the tower to the underground power connection. You must sever it completely, but..." Another massive discharge lit up the sky, close enough that I felt the heat wash over me. "But what?" "But there is a 20-second lag between when you cut it and when the capacitors discharge their stored energy. During that time, the tower will release everything it has stored in one massive pulse. You must be clear, at least 50 yards clear, or the electromagnetic field will stop your heart instantly." 20 seconds, got it. I ran toward the tower before I could think better of it, before my survival instincts could override my mission programming. The heat was incredible, like running toward the sun. My chronofiber coat began to stiffen, its protective systems engaging automatically. I could see the cable Tesla had described, could see where it entered the ground, could see the hell I was about to walk into. The first touch of electrical current felt like being hit with a sledgehammer. Every muscle in my body locked up. My jaw clamped shut so hard I thought my teeth would shatter. But the chronofiber held, distributing the current across its surface, keeping it away from my vital organs. Barely. I grabbed the cable with both hands, feeling the insulation beginning to melt under the current. The multi-tool in my coat pocket, standard Chrononaut equipment, had a molecular blade that could cut through almost anything. I pulled it out with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else, activated the blade, and sliced through the cable in one desperate motion. The current stopped instantly, the flow of power severed. For one perfect moment, the night went quiet. Then the tower began to shriek, a sound that had no place in nature, the sound of massive energies with nowhere to go. I turned and ran, counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. My legs felt like rubber, my nervous system scrambling to recover from the electrical assault. 4, 5, 6. Behind me, the tower's scream grew louder, more desperate. 7, 8, 9. I wasn't going to make it. I wasn't going to get clear in time. Then something slammed into me from the side, tackling me with enough force to knock the air from my lungs. We hit the ground hard, rolling through the dirt and sage, and I heard a woman's voice in my ear, urgent and furious. "Keep your head down, you idiot!" The world turned white. The electromagnetic pulse hit like a physical force, a wall of energy that made every nerve ending in my body scream in protest. I felt my chrono device go dead on my wrist, felt the chronofiber coat stiffen into temporary rigidity. But we were down, we were flat, and the bulk of the pulse passed over us like a storm surge, dissipating into the vast emptiness of the Colorado Plateau. When I could see again, when I could breathe again, I lifted my head and found myself staring into a pair of eyes that were gray-green in the starlight, set in a face that was angular and fierce and smudged with dirt and smoke. "Who?" I started. "Catherine," she said, already pushing herself up. "Catherine Abrams, and we need to move. Now. Whoever sabotaged that equipment is still out there, and they'll want to confirm the kill." She was on her feet before I could fully process what was happening, offering me a hand up. I took it, feeling calluses, feeling strength. She was dressed like a local, practical riding clothes, boots worn from use. But there was something about the way she moved that spoke of training, of purpose. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid, and she carried what looked like a Winchester rifle with practiced ease. "You're not from here," I said, getting to my feet. "No more than you are, Chrononaut Brown." Her smile was sharp in the darkness. "Did you really think you were the only one interested in keeping Tesla alive?" Behind us, the laboratory door opened and Tesla emerged, moving carefully across the darkened ground. His face was pale but composed, his scientist's mind already working through what had happened. "The tower is destroyed," he said quietly. "Months of work, calculations, equipment, irreplaceable instruments. Gone. But you're alive, Catherine said. Which means whoever did this failed their primary objective. They'll try again. Tesla looked at her, then at me, then back at her. I find myself in the unusual position of standing in my own research facility with two people who claim to be from the future. This is either the beginning of a nervous breakdown or the most interesting evening of my life. Vote for interesting, I said. Catherine, if you're here to protect Tesla, then we should coordinate. Compare intel, identify the threat, divide responsibilities. Is that what you'd like to do? She moved closer, studying me with those gray-green eyes. Coordinate? Because from where I'm standing, you just used future technology to interfere with a historical timeline, which violates about a dozen temporal accords. I saved his life. You exposed yourself, compromised your mission, and probably created 3 new divergence points while resolving one. Very heroic, also very stupid. Tesla cleared his throat. While I am fascinated by this discussion of temporal ethics, perhaps we could continue it inside, where we are less exposed to whoever wishes me dead. He had a point. We moved back into the laboratory, which had survived mostly intact despite the chaos outside. Tesla immediately began assessing the damage, making notes in one of his countless notebooks, his mind already rebuilding what had been destroyed. Catherine and I faced each other across the workbench, 2 chrononauts who should have been allies but who were clearly operating under different assumptions. Who do you work for? I asked. The Temporal Protection Agency, Division 7, Covert Operations. We handle situations where the standard chrononauts. She gave me a pointed look. Might be too visible, too limited by protocol. I didn't know Division 7 existed. That's the point of covert. And you're with the Historical Preservation Corps, right? The by-the-book, minimal interference, observe and document crew? We do more than observe. We prevent temporal corruption. By showing up in the middle of an electrical storm and materializing in front of your subject? Bold strategy. Tesla looked up from his notebook. I hate to interrupt what is clearly a territorial dispute, but I feel obliged to point out that someone just tried to kill me using my own equipment, and I would very much like to know who and why before they make a second attempt. Catherine pulled out a device similar to my chrono unit but smaller, more streamlined. She activated it, and a holographic display filled the air between us. Timelines branching and converging, probability matrices shifting in real time. 3 days ago, we detected a temporal incursion, she said, manipulating the display with practiced gestures. Someone from approximately 2190, 30 years ahead of both our times, arrived in Colorado Springs with stealth equipment and specialized knowledge. They've been systematically sabotaging Tesla's work, making it look like equipment failure or natural phenomenon. Tonight was supposed to be the final act. Make the tower overload. Make it look like Tesla's experiments were too dangerous, too unstable. But why kill him? I asked. What does that accomplish? Tesla himself answered, his voice quiet but certain. Delayed innovation, fear of the technology. If my work here fails catastrophically, if I die in the process, it creates a precedent. It makes people afraid of alternating current transmission, afraid of wireless power distribution. Edison wins. The direct current system becomes the standard. The entire electrical infrastructure of the 20th century develops along different, more limited lines. And someone in the future benefits from that, Catherine continued. We've traced the divergence forward. In the corrupted timeline, the fossil fuel industry maintains its monopoly for an additional 50 years. Climate change accelerates. Resource wars devastate Europe and Asia. By 2190, the world is... She paused. Let's just say there are powerful interests who would prefer that timeline. I felt sick. This was bigger than one inventor, bigger than one experiment. This was about reshaping an entire century of development, and whoever was behind it was willing to murder to make it happen. Where is this person now? I asked. The saboteur from 2190? Catherine's expression darkened. That's the problem. They're using equipment we don't have countermeasures for. Stealth fields that mask their temporal signature. Physical camouflage that's nearly perfect. They could be anyone. One of Tesla's assistants, a local rancher, someone we've already passed on the street. Tesla set down his notebook with a sharp tap. So I am supposed to trust no one, suspect everyone, and continue my work while waiting for another assassination attempt? That is not acceptable. We could evacuate you, I suggested. Take you somewhere safe until we identify the threat. Absolutely not. If I abandon my work, if I show fear, then the saboteur has already won. Besides, he gestured to the ruined equipment outside. I must rebuild. I must prove that the technology is safe, controllable. Anything less is surrender. Catherine was studying me again, something calculating in her gaze. We need to draw the saboteur out. Make them reveal themselves. How? By giving them what they want, or at least making them think they're getting it. Tesla continues his work, but we make it seem like he's vulnerable, unprotected. We set a trap. Using him as bait. I didn't like it. Using historical figures as bait violated every principle of Chrononaut ethics. Do you have a better idea? I didn't. Which was the problem? Tesla surprised both of us by nodding. I agree with Miss Abrams. I will not hide. I will not run. If someone wishes me dead, let them come. But they will find I am not so easy to kill. You're a scientist, not a soldier, I said. His smile was cold. My dear Mr. Brown, I have survived Edison's thugs, Westinghouse's lawyers, and my own laboratory accidents. I am not entirely without resources. He moved to a cabinet in the corner, unlocked it with a key from his vest pocket, and removed what looked like a modified pistol. Except it crackled with blue electrical energy, and the barrel was wrapped in copper coiling. I call it the electrostatic disruptor. It delivers a focused electromagnetic pulse sufficient to render a man unconscious without permanent damage. Usually. Catherine laughed, genuine and surprised. I like him. Can we keep him? That's not how this works, I said, but I was smiling despite myself. We spent the rest of the night planning. Tesla provided detailed maps of his facility, identified the most vulnerable points, explained the schedule for his experiments. Catherine set up temporal sensors around the perimeter, devices that would detect any chronological anomalies, any sign of temporal equipment being used. I focused on the physical security, identifying sight lines, entry points, places where an attacker might position themselves. As dawn broke over Pike's Peak, painting the laboratory in shades of gold and amber, I found myself alone with Catherine on the eastern porch. Tesla had finally gone to rest, exhausted but unwilling to show it. The morning air was cold, clean, carrying the smell of pine and the faint ozone scent that would probably never leave this place. You handled yourself well out there, Catherine said quietly. With the tower, that was brave. Reckless, but brave. Reckless seems to be my specialty. I read your file, you know, before I left my time. The Historical Preservation Corps keeps extensive records on all their chrononauts. Nikola Brown, 32 years old, 14 successful missions, 6 commendations for valor, 3 censures for protocol violations. She turned to look at me, and in the dawn light her eyes were more green than gray. They called you a cowboy, said you took too many risks, got too involved with your subjects. And yet they keep sending me on missions. Because you get results. Because when everything goes wrong, when the plan falls apart, you're the one who figures out how to save the day. She paused. Even if you break all the rules doing it. Is this leading somewhere? Maybe. I'm trying to decide if I can trust you. If we're going to work together on this, I need to know you won't go rogue, won't try to play hero at the expense of the mission. I thought about that, about all the times I'd bent protocols, about all the people I'd saved by refusing to follow the rules. I can't promise I'll follow orders if following orders means letting innocent people die. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to complete the mission and keep Tesla alive. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Good enough. Besides, a small smile played at the corner of her mouth. I have a feeling this mission is going to require a little rule-breaking before it's done. What makes you say that? Because whoever we're up against is willing to murder a historical figure to reshape an entire century. That level of commitment, that level of sophistication, they're not going to be stopped by following standard procedures. She was right. I knew she was right. But something else was bothering me. A question that had been nagging since she'd tackled me away from the electromagnetic pulse. "How did you know?" I asked. "How did you know exactly when to pull me down? Exactly where to position us to survive that pulse?" Her smile faded. "I told you. Division 7 handles the covert operations, the situations that requires what? Precognition? Catherine, you saved my life with split-second timing that shouldn't have been possible. So either you're the luckiest person in history or I've done this before." She turned away, looking out at the mountains. "That's the thing about covert operations, Brown. Sometimes the mission is bigger than you think. Sometimes you're not sent to prevent a divergence, you're sent to resolve one that's already happened." My blood went cold. "You're from a different timeline. A timeline where I died tonight. Where you died, and Tesla died, and the entire 20th century went to hell. Division 7 exists precisely because sometimes the only way to fix a corrupted timeline is to send someone back who already knows how it plays out, who can prevent the critical failures before they happen. That's..." I struggled for words. "That violates every temporal law I know. The paradoxes, the risk of creating causal loops, are all acceptable compared to the alternative. In the timeline I came from, the one where you died tonight, the saboteur succeeded. Tesla was killed. The electrical revolution was delayed by decades. World War I lasted 8 years instead of 4. The technology gap allowed fascism to spread faster, deeper. By 2157, the world was..." She stopped, her voice catching. "It was a place you wouldn't recognize, dark, dying. And you're here to stop that. I'm here to make sure you don't die saving Tesla because apparently you're supposed to do something important later." My mission briefing was very clear on that point. Keep Brown alive, help him complete his mission, but don't tell him why his survival matters so much. She looked at me, and there was something vulnerable in her expression now. "I've been watching you for 3 days, Brown. Following you, protecting you from threats you never saw. And every time you do something brave or stupid or heroic, I remember why they sent me back to save you. I should have been angry. Angry at the deception. Angry at being manipulated. Angry at the casual way she talked about violating temporal causality. But instead, I found myself moving closer to her, drawn by something I didn't quite understand. "You can't tell me what I'm supposed to do," I said. "What mission I'm supposed to complete. No. That would create a predestination paradox, force you into actions you might not naturally take. All I can do is..." She hesitated. "All I can do is make sure you survive long enough to make your own choices." The moment hung between us, charged with more than just the residual electricity in the air. Then Catherine straightened, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Tesla's awake. I can hear him moving around inside. We should finalize the plan, get everything ready before tonight." "Why tonight?" "Because the saboteur will know their first attempt failed. They'll know Tesla is aware someone is targeting him, which means they'll have to move fast, before he can bring in authorities, before he can fortify his position. Tonight is their last clean shot." She was right. Everything in my training, everything I knew about how temporal saboteurs operated, confirmed it. Tonight would be the final confrontation, one way or another. We spent the day preparing. Tesla threw himself into rebuilding his equipment with manic energy, refusing to let the sabotage defeat him. Catherine and I set up a perimeter of sensors and traps, creating a web of detection systems that would make it nearly impossible for anyone to approach unnoticed. I also took the time to work on my chrono device, coaxing it back to partial functionality. I couldn't make a temporal jump yet, but I could access some of its defensive capabilities. As the sun began to set behind Pikes Peak, painting the laboratory in shades of blood and gold, Tesla called us into his workspace. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright with triumph. "I have rebuilt the primary coil," he announced. "Not as large, not as powerful as before, but functional. Tonight I will complete a demonstration, a transmission of power across a distance of 1 mile, to a receiver I have positioned outside of Colorado Springs. It will prove the viability of the technology, will show that last night's disaster was sabotage, not inherent instability." "That's a terrible idea," I said immediately. "You're giving the saboteur exactly what they want, another chance to destroy your work and kill you in the process." "Precisely. But this time we will be ready. He gestured to Catherine and me. "I will be inside the laboratory, monitored and protected. You two will be outside watching for any approach." And he held up his electrostatic disruptor with something like affection. "I am not entirely defenseless." Catherine was already checking her equipment, her face set with determination. "Positions. Brown, you take the northern approach. That's the most likely infiltration route. I'll cover the south and east. Tesla, you stay inside, doors locked, no one enters unless it's one of us and only after proper identification." "What proper identification?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "Quote something from H.G. Wells's The Time Machine, specific enough that the saboteur couldn't fake it even if they heard us discussing protocols. The time traveler, for so it will be convenient to speak of him, was expounding a recondite matter to us." Tesla recited without hesitation. The opening line. I have read it 17 times. "Of course you have," Catherine said, but she was smiling. As darkness fell, I moved to my position on the northern perimeter. The night was clear, cold, the stars bright enough to cast shadows. I could see the rebuilt coil behind the laboratory, could see the lights of Colorado Springs in the distance. Everything was quiet, peaceful. It felt like a lie. My chrono device vibrated against my wrist, Catherine's signal that the demonstration was beginning. Inside the laboratory, Tesla would be powering up his equipment, sending electrical energy across the plateau to his distant receiver. It was the perfect moment for an attack, when he was focused on his work, when his attention was divided. I scanned the darkness, my hand on my multi-tool, my senses straining for any sign of approach. Nothing. Just wind in the sage, the distant call of a night bird, the electric hum from the laboratory. Then I saw it. A shimmer in the starlight, like heat distortion, but wrong, too precise. Someone was using a stealth field, and they were moving toward the laboratory from the west. The one angle Catherine and I had agreed was too exposed for an approach, which meant the saboteur was either desperate or had equipment good enough to make the impossible approach work. I moved quickly but quietly, circling around to intercept. The shimmer was getting closer to the building, close enough now that I could make out a human shape inside the distortion. They were carrying something, a device about the size of a briefcase, covered in the same stealth field, but with a faint blue glow at its edges. A temporal bomb. I recognized it from the training simulations. Detonate that inside the laboratory and it wouldn't just kill Tesla. It would erase the entire building from the timeline, make it so the Colorado Springs experiments never happened at all. I couldn't let them reach the door. I charged, crossing the distance in seconds, tackling the shimmer with enough force to break through the stealth field. We hit the ground hard, rolling through the dirt, and I caught a glimpse of my opponent, a man, late 40s, hard-faced and professional. He recovered faster than I expected, driving an elbow into my ribs with precision that spoke of military training. We fought in the darkness, silent and desperate. He was good, better than me in pure combat ability, but I had something he didn't. I was fighting for something more than money or ideology. I was fighting because Tesla deserved to live, because the future deserved to happen the way it was meant to, because Catherine had crossed timelines to give me a chance to do this right. I managed to pin him for a moment, my forearm across his throat, my other hand reaching for the temporal bomb he'd dropped. "Who sent you?" I gasped. "Who's paying you to destroy the timeline?" He laughed, blood on his teeth. "You think this is about money? This is about survival. In my time, the world is dying because of choices made in this century, because of the technology this madman is creating. I'm saving billions of lives by stopping him. You're killing him to save people who don't exist yet in a timeline that doesn't have to happen. All timelines are real, Chrononaut. All possible futures exist simultaneously. I'm just making sure mine is the one that prevails." He surged upward, breaking my hold with a twist that should have been impossible. Then his hand was inside his coat, pulling out a weapon, a temporal disruptor that could age me 50 years in 3 seconds. The shot came from my left. Catherine's rifle, the crack of gunpowder loud in the clear night air. The saboteur staggered, looked down at the spreading red on his chest, then collapsed. Catherine ran up, her rifle still trained on the fallen man. "Is he dying?" I said quietly, kneeling beside him. "Catherine, the temporal bomb. We need to disarm it." But the saboteur was smiling, blood bubbling on his lips. Too late. It's on a timer. 30 seconds. You can run, you can try to evacuate Tesla, but you'll never make it. The building, the research, the great Nikola Tesla, all of it erased in... He coughed. 25 seconds. Catherine was already moving toward the device, pulling tools from her belt. I can disarm it. I've seen these before. You said you've seen them. Not that you know how to disarm them. Minor distinction. Get Tesla out. Now. I ran for the laboratory, knowing it was probably futile, knowing 30 seconds wasn't enough time. The door was locked, Tesla following protocol, and I pounded on it, shouting the identification phrase. The time traveler was expounding a recondite matter. The lock clicked. Tesla opened the door, saw my face, and knew immediately something was wrong. What? Temporal bomb, 20 seconds. We have to run. He didn't argue, didn't waste time with questions. He grabbed his notebook, the one containing all his Colorado Springs calculations, and ran with me into the night. Behind us, I could see Catherine working frantically over the device, her hands moving with desperate speed. "Catherine," I shouted, "leave it. Get clear." "Almost got it. 10 seconds, Catherine." She looked up, looked at me, and I saw the decision in her eyes. She wasn't going to make it. If she ran now, she might save herself. But if the bomb detonated, it would create a temporal dead zone, a zone where time itself was erased, making it impossible for anyone from the future to ever enter this location again. Tesla wouldn't die, but his work would be unsalvageable. The timeline would still be corrupted, just differently. "Brown," she called out. "Your chrono device, it's partially charged, right? Not enough for displacement, but enough for a temporal field. Small one, just a few seconds of stasis. Throw it to me." I understood what she was asking. My chrono device could generate a localized temporal stasis field. Freeze time in a small area for a few seconds. It was an emergency feature, designed to give chrononauts time to escape dangerous situations. But using it on a temporal bomb would be like trying to stop a nuclear explosion by holding your breath. I didn't hesitate. I tore the device from my wrist and threw it to her. She caught it one-handed, slammed it against the bomb's casing, and activated the field. The world went silent. The temporal bomb froze, its countdown suspended in a bubble of motionless time. Catherine's hands became a blur, working around the edges of the stasis field, accessing the bomb's inner mechanisms through the brief gaps where the field's edge flickered. 5 seconds. 4. 3. "Catherine, get away from it." 2. 1. The stasis field collapsed. The bomb began to pulse with blue light, its detonation sequence completing, and Catherine threw something away from her, something small and bright. The bomb's power core, extracted at the last possible second, flying through the air to land in the dirt 20 feet away. The device itself went dark, inert, no longer a threat. Catherine collapsed to her knees, gasping. I ran to her, helped her up, and we stood there in the darkness, alive against all probability. Tesla walked up slowly, still clutching his notebook. "Miss Abrams," he said quietly. "That was the bravest thing I have ever witnessed." "It was the stupidest thing I've ever done," she said, but she was smiling. "And I'm from Division 7, that's saying something." We spent the next hour cleaning up. The saboteur's body would have to be dealt with carefully. Temporal protocols required that we remove all evidence of future technology before leaving. His equipment, his clothing, even his DNA would have to be cleansed from the timeline. It was grim work, but necessary. Tesla watched us work with his typical analytical detachment, asking questions, taking notes. Finally, when we'd finished, he set down his notebook and looked at us both. "I will not remember this," he said. It wasn't a question. Catherine met his gaze steadily. "Standard protocol. We'll have to administer a temporal memory suppressant before we leave. You'll remember the sabotage, remember rebuilding your equipment, but the details will be hazy. You won't remember us specifically. So I will have been saved by people I cannot remember, using technology I cannot comprehend to protect a future I will never see." Tesla's smile was sad. "There is something beautifully tragic about that." "Your work matters," I said. "Everything you do here, everything you create, it lights up the entire world, literally. Every light bulb, every power line, every city that glows at night exists because of choices you make in this laboratory. That's worth protecting even if you don't remember how it was protected. Tesla nodded slowly. One question, before you erase my memory. In this future you come from, in the world that exists because I succeed here, am I happy? I thought about the lonely hotel room, the obscurity, the poverty. I thought about telling him the truth. Then I thought about Catherine's words, about choices, about not forcing someone down a predetermined path. You're brilliant, I said finally. You change the world. Whether that makes you happy, that's something only you can decide by how you choose to live your life. A careful answer, but an honest one. Tesla extended his hand. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Miss Abrams. I may not remember you, but I am grateful nonetheless. We shook hands, and then Catherine administered the temporal memory suppressant, a quick injection that would blur the details of the past few days, make them seem like dreams or delusions brought on by exhaustion and stress. Tesla's eyes went unfocused for a moment, then cleared. He looked around, confused. I was conducting an experiment. The tower was damaged. He frowned. Someone helped me, but I cannot recall. It's okay, Catherine said gently. You're safe now. Get some rest. Tomorrow you can assess the damage and plan your next steps. Tesla nodded slowly and walked back into his laboratory, already beginning to rationalize the gaps in his memory, already beginning to rebuild the narrative into something that made scientific sense. Catherine and I walked away from the building, away from the man who would change the world without ever knowing we'd been there. My chrono device was destroyed, used up in the effort to save the timeline. I'd need to signal for extraction, request a replacement, file the endless reports that would follow a mission this complicated. What happens now? I asked Catherine as we stood on the dark plateau, looking up at the stars. Now I go back to my time and file my own reports. Explain how we saved the timeline, how Brown survived to complete whatever mysterious future mission has everyone so concerned. She turned to me. And you go back to being a cowboy chrononaut, breaking rules and saving people. Will I see you again? Depends. Are you planning on getting into more situations where you need someone from Division 7 to pull your ass out of the fire? Seems likely. Then yeah, you'll see me again. She moved closer, close enough that I could see the gray-green of her eyes even in the darkness. You did good tonight, Brown. Tesla's alive, the timeline is preserved, and... She paused. And I got to make sure you survive for whatever comes next. You never told me what that is, what mission I'm supposedly so important for. Can't. Temporal paradox, but... She reached out, touched my face gently. But I can tell you that meeting you tonight, working with you, seeing why they sent me back to save you, it was worth it. All the risk, all the protocol violations. Worth it. She kissed me then, soft and brief and full of promise. Then she stepped back, activated her temporal displacement device and vanished in a corona of light that looked like plasma discharge but with characteristics I'd never witnessed before. I stood alone in the darkness, tasting ozone and possibility, wondering what future mission could possibly be important enough to require Catherine to cross timelines to ensure I survived, wondering if I'd ever see her again, or if she was just another ghost in my past, another person I'd met and saved and lost to the currents of time. In the laboratory behind me, Tesla was already working, already calculating, already beginning to reshape the world through pure force of genius. He wouldn't remember us, but history would. The lights that would illuminate cities across the globe, the technology that would power a civilization, the choices that would be made because one brilliant man was allowed to live and work and dream. All of that was our legacy, even if no one would ever know we'd been there. I activated my emergency beacon, requesting extraction. In approximately 6 hours, another Chrononaut would arrive to retrieve me, to debrief me, to file the reports, and close this mission. Until then, I had time to think, to process, to wonder what the hell I was supposed to do with my life now that I knew some future version of me was apparently important enough to merit cross-timeline intervention. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and uncaring. Somewhere in those infinite spaces, in the vast possibilities of time and causality, There were versions of this night that ended differently. Versions where I died. Versions where Tesla died. Versions where the world went dark because we failed. But not this version. Not tonight. I walked to the edge of the plateau and looked out at Colorado Springs, at the few electric lights glowing in the darkness. In a few decades, those few lights would become millions. In a century, the entire planet would glow bright enough to be seen from space. And it would all trace back to this place, this time, this one man working in isolation because he believed in a better future. Catherine had said I was important, that some future mission required me to survive. I didn't know what that mission was, couldn't know without risking paradox. But standing there in the darkness, having just saved one of history's greatest minds, I made a decision. Whatever that future mission was, whenever it came, I would face it the same way I'd face tonight. By refusing to let good people die, by breaking whatever rules needed breaking, by being the cowboy chrononaut they said I was. Because if Catherine was right, if the survival of the timeline sometimes required people willing to take risks, to make hard choices, to stand between the darkness and the light, then that's exactly what I'd be. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and possibility. Behind me, the laboratory hummed with renewed energy as Tesla worked through the night. Above me, the stars burned with cold fire, and inside me something shifted. A determination, a commitment, a promise to whatever future self had apparently earned all this dramatic intervention. I would survive. I would complete my missions. I would face whatever was coming with the same stubborn courage that had gotten me this far. And maybe, just maybe, I'd see Catherine again. The beacon on my wrist pulsed softly, confirming extraction was en route. I had hours still before pickup. Hours to process everything that had happened, everything I'd learned about timelines and choices and the weight of being someone else's hope for the future. But for now, I just stood there in the darkness, watching Tesla's laboratory glow with the light of genius, knowing I'd helped preserve something precious and irreplaceable, knowing that tonight, at least, I'd gotten it right. I am Nikola Brown, a traveler through time and history. If you enjoyed this adventure of mine, subscribe to the channel and share it.